So, what I wanted to cover off and talk about today is the approach that you may want to consider or take when you get a negative review, and particularly, focusing in on construction. Online reviews nowadays are where people go to. They're often looking at your online presence, any feedback that past customers have left you, to decide whether to go with you. So you may have heard of the saying that it takes years to build up trust or build up a reputation, and it takes seconds to ruin it. And I think that that's really, really applicable in the world of construction, especially if you're in the domestic space when it comes to reviews. Less so from a reviews point if you're in the kind of commercial space, but definitely if you're a specialist in a certain area, it becomes really, really easy to lose a reputation that you've spent years and years building up. If you started your business yourself, especially like in construction, you can get really attached to, and it can really affect you when you get a negative review. I think that's what I'm trying to say here. So what I wanted to cover off and talk about today is some thoughts on the process and the approach that you may want to consider or take when you get a negative review, and particularly, focusing in on construction. Online reviews nowadays are where people go to, especially if you're kind of dealing with homeowners when it comes to construction. They don't necessarily have contacts or anything like that, so they're often looking at your online presence, any feedback that past customers have left you, to decide whether to go with you. So yeah, I wanted to talk about the kind of the approach, the options, and some suggestions when, let's say if and when, because really it's always going to happen to everybody, you get a negative review for your business. I think the first step when that does happen is to look at whether you can get it removed. Because even if it was a genuine review, from a business point of view, it doesn't really help having that review. So if there is an option to get that review removed, I think it's worth exploring it. You can go a few different ways with this. Probably the easiest option, and I think the option that is quickest and most effective, is to actually reach out to the person that left the review and try to get it removed. So sometimes this could be a matter of removing certain elements of the review. It could be a matter of adjusting the wording or the rating of the review. We've all seen it where people just leave a 1-star review if they're not happy with the slightest thing, and so maybe they would kind of reconsider leaving a 3-star, 4-star review rather than going for the absolute negative thing. The other approach when kind of getting a homeowner or a client, doesn't have to be a homeowner, to remove the review is to see if you can reach out to them and rectify the specific issue that they're not happy with, on the basis that they would remove that review. And you don't necessarily have to kind of say, if you will you remove it if I actually do X thing. I think the best way is actually to go out there and rectify the issue if you think you should be doing that, and then approach them and say, look, we've fixed the thing you were complaining about. Will you consider removing that review? And unfortunately, sometimes even if you know that you're not necessarily in the wrong, it's better to just do it when you're thinking about kind of future business. I'll also mention this later on this same topic. It may sometimes be more effective to see if you can get somebody else to communicate with that particular client, especially if you're quite involved with that particular project. There may be a better situation where you can get an intermediate person to, maybe someone else in your team, to actually communicate with that homeowner about the situation and about the review, and they may be more willing to have a discussion about adjusting certain elements of that review. I do also understand that sometimes it's not possible to remove the review. Sometimes it may make things worse if you are just going to communicate. So that option may not be a possibility for you in terms of going back to the actual person that left the review to ask them to change it and adjust it. There are also options to actually get the review removed. It does depend on which platform you're looking at, like Trustpilot, Google Reviews. All the different platforms have slightly different methods of approaching this, but generally speaking, if the review has some sort of personal information in it, if there's like bullying or hate speech, things like that, then you can report the review to the platform, and usually to be honest, it's done automatically, so it's not actually reviewed by a person often, and this can take some time, and it's not necessarily going to actually work, even if you're convinced that the review does actually hit some of these categories. It doesn't necessarily guarantee that it's going to be removed. And sometimes you'll find that the review, fails in other areas, but because there isn't an exact category of exactly what's happened, that you have to kind of assume a different one and report it under that, and often that's unlikely to actually get removed. So it's always worth exploring that option of reporting a review on the platform to see if you can get it removed, and maybe if you've got other team members, friends, family that can also do a similar thing, that may flag the review up on the platform more if they've got more people looking at and reporting it. The final way that you could potentially have a review removed is going down the kind of legal route. Most of the time it's probably not worth it, I would say. Obviously it depends on what that review contains, how impactful it is to your business, obviously how truthful it is of whatever they're asking for, or not asking for, whatever they're saying, and also whether it's worth the cost, the legal cost, and it's not necessarily guaranteed to get it removed. Usually you would look at pursuing that if there's some sort of like defamation in terms of what they're saying, particularly if it's not truthful. Come across companies that write it in their contracts that you kind of can't leave a negative review, especially if you don't kind of raise the issue with the company first. Personally, I don't know how comfortable a client would feel if they saw a term like that in your contract. So I personally would probably shy away from doing that. And I don't know how if that's really got that much legs if you actually wanted to pursue breach of contract under a term like that. So I think that's an option as well. But I've left it till last essentially because I just don't really think that the kind of legal route is actually worthwhile to pursue in most cases. So the next option really, I think, is to leave a response to the review. Now, one thing to actually add is you don't actually have to kind of necessarily get the review removed or respond to it. You can basically do both. A lot of people don't know, but most platforms you can edit a response. It looks bad generally if you've got a review up on your company's platform, wherever it is, and the review hasn't been responded to. So sometimes just a simple acknowledgement of the review and a note that it's being investigated can really help how the brand looks to prospective customers. So I'd encourage, even if you are pursuing to get a review removed or you're pursuing legal action or whatever, it's always good to try and get into the habit of responding to the review, even if on a basic form, and then coming back with a more formal response. Or maybe you don't even have to do another response if the review gets taken down eventually. And this kind of links to the overall reason why you want to put a response to the review. You want to be looking at this, in my view, you want to be looking at this more, the response to a review and how you deal with a review more from a perspective of how you look to your new prospective customers and clients, rather than kind of this as a channel or a driver for you to kind of resolve the issue on your project or the issue that the client has got. Obviously, you want to take the feedback on and all of that stuff, and I'll get to that in a second. But really, when it comes to responding to a review, I really think the primary focus should be how is somebody that comes across this review, as in a potential client, gonna interpret this situation based on reading my response. And I've seen several cases, both personal and speaking to other construction business owners, where actually a really good response, a thoughtful response, can turn around a very negative looking review to make you actually look more positive, and if anything better than if you never had the review in the first place. So that's how I would look at it as a primary focus. Now, when you are responding to a review, and here I'm talking more about the actual proper formal response in terms of the full and final response, let's say, there's a few things that I would suggest to kind of take into account when you're putting a review together. So, firstly, as I said, try and think of it from a perspective of a prospective client responding, reading it, rather than writing back to the owner. At the end of the day, that person is probably never going to do business with you again. You getting one up on them with a kind of smart response doesn't really benefit your business, especially if it puts other people off. So really, I think, be conscious of potential clients are really looking at the language you use, the way you approach things, the grammar and all of that, because essentially they're thinking, if my project goes to shit, this is how this person is going to deal with me. So if they're seeing somebody that is rude, aggressive in their response, they're going to be put off with dealing with you. Whereas if you're coming across as fair, reasonable, sticking to the facts and all of that, then sometimes I'll come across it and say, fair enough. I think you'll be surprised. Many clients nowadays are business owners or have experience, running businesses, small businesses, medium-sized businesses. They understand that things go wrong and don't necessarily think, oh, just because you've got a negative review, it's a bad thing. So I mentioned it there, but just to hone in on the second thing is kind of try and stick to the facts and don't let the emotions get the better of you. There's a bit of a fine balance with not just listing off points and sounding like a lawyer and a robot and adding a little bit of emotion. But what I mean is, don't fire back on personal attacks with a personal attack yourself about the client. Try to resolve the issue, or at least kind of explain the issue and explain things from your perspective that maybe puts a little bit of doubt into the validity of the claims that are being made on the the review about your business. The other thing that I would suggest as a bit of a tip related to the kind of like not having too much emotion around the matter is leave it at least 24 hours before actually posting a review. So draft a response, sleep on it, have a think about it before you actually hit post. That really just helps with, I guess, just not having too much emotion around it. And this is a bit of a tip for anytime you've got a situation where you've got somebody being a dick, you can just feel that you're getting angry, annoyed. Just give it a bit of time. It never makes sense to respond to those emails like immediately. You almost always regret it when you go back and look. You can also get somebody else to review the response, or better still, actually get somebody else that's fairly clued up on the matter to actually write it and you approve it. This is another way to kind of get somebody to just help you make sure you're sticking to the facts, get somebody that can give you a perspective of what an external person, when reading the review, what vibe they get when they see the response. If you don't have anybody that can do that with you, maybe explore other options like using ChatGPT just to post your review in and just get some feedback from there. I think any time you get some external opinion, even if it's from AI, I think that's really, really going to help with responding in a good way, in my opinion. The final thing that I would say on leaving a response is accept if there has been some fault made and focus on, I would say, like what your business has done to address that and stop that happening in the future. So again, not honing in on specifically the problem in that particular client's case, but actually, if there is an issue in your processes or somebody dropped the ball, use that review as an opportunity to present what the business has done different. Maybe you've done some training, maybe you've put in new processes, maybe you've hired somebody new, or maybe you're planning to do something, but at least share that to make the potential person who's reading it, the new potential client feel like, okay, this in theory is now unlikely to happen in my project because now they've got this procedure, or at least it gives that impression that you are like a forward thinking company that, takes on feedback and tries to actually improve, and again gives that vibe where it's like, okay, nobody's perfect, but you guys are at least trying to do something. And you can always put in your review, look, we've contacted you directly to address your specific situation. However, to prevent this happening in the future, we understand X happened. We've now implemented Y, into our business procedures, something like that. So that would be my kind of main tips when it comes to, responding to an actual review, a negative one anyway. And finally, I just wanted to kind of finish up on I guess, like just embracing the negativity of the review. It's not always a bad thing. I really do believe that it is part of the process of a business growing. I actually have, in personal experience, situations where, starting when you're growing your business and you're so hands-on the job, everything goes perfectly, and your reviews are generally 100% 5-star reviews, and that's great because you feel really proud. You're like confident that the service is great. And then you get hit with that negative review in the first one or the second one, especially if it's because the business is scaling and you're maybe stepping out and you have to have multiple jobs, multiple people that you're relying on, and they're never going to be as on the ball as you are as the owner. And yeah, it's easy to kind of take that as a negative thing and maybe even make you feel like, okay, I need to step back. I need to not scale anymore and get back involved and make sure, the clients are super happy. But my view personally is that will come, and actually just embracing that as like, okay, this is now the next stage of my business is probably, yeah, in my view, the best way to look at it. And especially if you are genuinely looking at this as feedback in areas that you need to improve and really trying to work out what processes or what does need to change in the business, other than you just getting back involved hands-on to actually stop this happening to another client. And I actually found that in my personal experience, when I was running my business with basically impeccable reviews, 5-star reviews across the board, once we actually got a few negative reviews and we responded in a way that that I've just already outlined, there was actually feedback from people coming back and saying, we were actually suspicious that all your reviews are like perfect. But so actually sometimes I really think that having some negative reviews and some really good responses around it can make the business look stronger in a way, and actually give a bit more genuineness around the actual reviews that are left. So yeah, I would definitely say just to embrace that process. It's not necessarily a negative thing, and particularly if you work on not getting emotional around it, eventually it will just become a process in your business. And ideally you want to, once you've got your own groove of how you want to deal with these negative reviews, I'd actually recommend you create like an operating procedure about the sequence of events of when you do get negative feedback, like how you actually go around doing the steps that I've just mentioned. Can you remove it? Can you reach out to the client? Can you fix the issue? Can you respond to it? How do you respond to it? And actually, if you get that process all organized and automated, then you probably will also find that it doesn't affect you anywhere near as much. So that's it. Hopefully that was some useful tips about how to deal with negative reviews in your business.